participate electronically if needed, which is not needed. So then the approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we got to vote.
Cast your vote.
Cast your votes, please, and then tally the votes,
Shouldn't we
please.
have a roll call?
It does not say roll call, but
Well,
okay.
We should have a roll call.
Let's have a roll call.
Don't we always have a roll call?
We do have a roll call.
Yeah,
We always have a roll call.
yeah.
Roll call, please.
Thank you, Ms.
Dr.
Margot.
Chase,
Here.
Ms. Guy,
Here.
Ms. Halsted,
Here.
Ms. Healy,
Here.
Ms. Randall,
Here,
Ms. Sigmund,
not yet,
Dr. Warner.
not
Not
yet.
yet.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we're down to the approval of the agenda. Did we vote? Did it pop up? Oh, okay, my bad. Sorry, I didn't see it. All right, on to 2.1, review and consideration of potential high school redistricting scenarios.
All right, great. So I have another cover page coming. It's being printed right now, so I'm gonna hand that out. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really hot off the press. But the first page, it'll be a new amended first page. I don't like typos. Lord. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Fomer. All right.
Is this different from last night's or the same as last night's? The one that we got right now?
It's the same.
It's the same from last night? with
Same data.
Additional hot off the press, sorry.
This is from last night, that
Yes.
was emailed to us last night, and then you're gonna give us an additional current page.
Yes, I'm just going to give you a new cover page because
Cover page.
there's a
Okay.
typographic error on the cover. So
Okay,
I'll give you that.
okay, thank you.
All right, so I want to start off with what's new. The scenarios have been updated from the 2023 data with our latest 2024 information. As you all know, we recently completed our student enrollment projections for the next 10 years, and we've updated the boundary scenarios to reflect our latest projections. At the same time, we've also updated our student demographic information to 2024, so everything aligns with the 2024 school year. All right, so just do a little house cleaning. Next steps in the process after this evening. November 12th, we have school board information and public hearing here at the Bandy Complex at 7 p.m. And then on December 10th, there'll be school board action where the board will approve high school boundaries, also here at 7 p.m. And of course, the school boundaries will take effect in August 2026. All right, with that being said, I'm going to open the floor to discussion, or if you want me to go through slides, I can do that, if that's your choice.
So I had a question just based on the new numbers we got. Did a week or two ago, we were told that free and reduced lunch county average for high school went from 47% to 50%. I'm guessing the county high school average is lower than that based on these numbers. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with the latest information we've received, that number is lower.
And do you know what it is? I mean, my back of the envelope kind of calculation would be around 37%, but I don't really know, so.
Yes, I'll get you that information before the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I'll confirm that.
I was just curious, yeah.
I was calculating in all of our A through H1s as well, and it was anywhere between 37 and 37.7 was what I was calculating for all of them as well.
I also want to say thank you for getting us the estimated English language learner population. And for me, I will just say that to have North at 32% English language learners, that means like if I walk down the hall, every third student would be trying to learn English. And that seems like an awful lot of pressure to put on a school, unless we as a board are going to make some pretty major staffing changes before I would want to approve a plan like that, but that's just me.
I will add, our staffing for our EL population is already based on number of students and the degree, what level they're at. So we already provide staffing standards that adjust for that. So they do get additional support there for each of those special, or those English language learners. And also, one of the things we are working on is getting a better breakout too. This is, we have, 5 levels of English language learners. So all of them are included in this. So we could have level 5, which basically means they're graduating out of being an ELL student. So not all of them are your typical, with the stereotypical. like,
Sure,
EL
and I would expect that Mountain View and Stafford at 13%, not all of those students are, I think that that's going to be the case across the board. So, I would be appreciative maybe of getting a little more information about exactly how much additional staffing are we talking about at a school that has 32% English language learners, because I'm not sure that when you get to that volume, that just adding based on the percentage of students is really going to provide the help that a school would need. So I would just like.
There's also only one scenario that has that as the highest number.
Sure, but 30
So-
is too high for me too.
No, I understand that, but if that's going to be the metric, then it would appear to me that the conversation has to be whether those scenarios are removed from debate and discussion, in terms of, but, and I don't know anything about relativity in numbers, so just, go with me on the word I use. But in terms of all things being relative, we're still at an exponentially higher rate, and to Chris's point, we staff to that higher rate currently, so unless everyone leaves, I
Can I
don't know
ask,
why.
though, this, so when we have, Mr. Fulmer, when we have a school that, moves to Title I, it sometimes takes us a couple years to provide the immediate help they need. They don't get it right away. So how is that done with, and now I don't know if this is a question for you, I'm just asking you, how is that done for a growing L population?
And I thought we didn't have Title I for high school. I
No,
thought
I'm just
Title-
saying
okay.
that's a way that we do it, like for elementary. I'm just curious what the process is with a growing, is it right away? Or is this, do they have to go with the, the 24 projection and then the 25 projection is when they'll get it in 26? You know what I mean? Like, is it right away that they get the support? Or is there a wait and see
Like the
before they
rolling
get it?
average from class size
Yeah.
reduction.
No, so especially if they're already there, and North Stafford's already at 28%, so we're not, yeah.
But if they go higher and it require, now I know it depends. Is it a
We
tier
adjust
1,
the
2, 3?
FTEs based on that projection, so
Right
for
away.
next year, yes, correct,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
And hypothetically, we're not changing the number of students. So if the staff follows the students, then there should be an equivalent level of services. Unless there's significant increase in the number of students, in which case we would need to add more staff, correct?
What I understand that and I get it. I'm just saying, when you get high enough in those numbers, I'm concerned that there may be kind of a snowball effect, and that it may need to be that we ought to consider doing more than just X number of students gets you this much extra, if that makes sense. That's my concern. So, and it's not something I have the answer for. It's something that I would ask, I'd ask Dr. Rice, or I'd ask high school principals to give us some feedback on that.
Okay, but at this point, there's only a couple scenarios that go up higher than the highest right now is 28. And if we were to determine that we didn't want to consider those scenarios, then it wouldn't be a
Yeah,
particular
I
issue.
still have the issue that we did a spot redistricting last year that changed those numbers at North, and the board was not involved in that decision, so I don't know what the ELL numbers were before the most recent redistricting. So there was a redistricting for just north
Right.
last year.
Right.
But wasn't that the one the superintendent had authority, it was below a certain, was it 5% or something of the population? So
Yes.
that was all in accordance with the,
Policy,
with the policy. Well, are we going to discuss, and I know we need Dr. Warner and Ms. Sigmund, but are we going to discuss any of these scenarios? I mean, the purpose of tonight is to consider eliminating some, not necessarily eliminating them, but to talk about it and seeing if there's any that there's just no way that, we would consider, voting for, then if there's a majority that feels that way, I would think that they could be eliminated.
So I also feel that we need to eliminate some of the scenarios based on a few things. One is to avoid public confusion, because this creates confusion for me, and I've seen them over and over and over again. But I'm talking about, like, we want the public to come and talk to us on Tuesday in a public hearing about their feelings on, the specific scenarios that are presented. And this doesn't help them to structure, in my opinion, doesn't help them to structure their thoughts and give us. So I'd like to see if we come to consensus on removing a few of them that are not necessarily optimal at this point in the game.
Madam
mean,
Vice Chair,
And
do
I
you
don't say we
want to?
do it without Maureen and, I'm sorry, without Ms. Sigmund and Dr. Warner, but I think that's a discussion that we have to have.
Madam Vice Chair, do you want to go through scenarios as we can? We can go slow to wait for the others, and just, a yes or a no, or pro or con, or something to think about, if we just want to go through each of the scenarios.
And just weigh in.
Sure. I don't know if that's a good way or not. I'm just asking.
So you start.
Oh, me? Okay. Scenario A, I am okay with. For me, I'm on the balcony, sort of looking down, and I would like to see Mountain View is the largest school at the end of, in 2032, and that's if all of the build-outs happen, as Lionel has explained to us. And North is the smallest at that point. Let me see where,
What did you just say?
I think she meant the opposite. I think.
Yeah, I was
she
going to
said-
say, that's not
Yeah.
what I'm seeing on
Right.
these
Mountain
View
these
is the
numbers
largest.
here.
Yeah.
Not scenario A.
okay.
I thought you were talking about population, how many
She's
students.
looking here at 2032.
No, I'm looking,
I just think that.
I'm not looking there, I'm looking here. This is the
Oh,
population.
you're
of-
looking at 2027, you said 2032.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you said
Yeah, yeah.
2032. That's why I was
Sorry,
confused.
20, yeah, I was looking at the 2027 numbers.
Oh, okay.
It's on the back of
It's that
scenario
last
A.
chart that he
Yeah.
gave us. And then, but I have a problem with the fact that in 2032, it's 104. Again, I understood when I was reading what you put down, Mr. White, about how one of the things was if we keep North and Brook a little full, it makes high school 7 boundary changes easier. But for me, I feel like, and we've heard it in 2 of the public hearings, I went to all 3, heard it in 2 of them, about being mindful that a full North Stafford is not like a full Forge or a full Mountain View. Hallways, I get that. I've been there as a student, and also I went to observe twice. They asked me to come and look. And so I kind of agree with that. And where I think would be helpful, ideally, is if Forge was a little bigger, because if Forge needs a superintendent boundary change, it's easier to slice here, send to North, slice here, send to Mountain View, slice here, High School 6, Stafford, or Brook Point. But when you fill North, the only option you have is, 2 schools, and they may not be up for it. So I kind of feel, I like that idea, but I don't like what it does to North. And I know that's not you, that's just me. So I have a problem with 32, in 2032, North being at 104. I just don't think that's the school that can handle that.
So, oh, go ahead, Trish.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Mr. White, could you remind us what you said about the 2032 estimates? I
Right, so
mean,
the-
how,
Yeah.
how much we should reasonably rely on them?
Right, so the 2032 estimates are the absolute worst-case scenario. It assumes that every current active unit in the county is built out. So it's the absolute worst-case scenario that we're preparing for. So that's my answer to that. And, the likelihood that every unit builds out, we won't know until 10 years from now, but highly unlikely. But we have it in our projection just to plan for it, just in the event it does happen.
So, I mean, I agree with Ms. Randall, though, in terms of other than those 2032 estimates, I don't have a problem from the balcony view. Now, Ms. Randall and I are in the southern end of the county, and so we don't have a lot of our constituents being affected. So from my perspective, A is an acceptable option. But like I said, it's not, I mean, I definitely want to hear from those folks who have lots of students who will be affected by this. I mean, most of the plans for my district are exactly the same. Yeah.
To that end, though, we're actually all trying to decide how to unscrew the county. And that affects all of our districts, no matter what, because all of our kids and families are impacted at some level, whether it's transportation or access to resources or whatever that may be. So I don't think there's any scenario here where none of us are actively being, or our constituents aren't being actively affected by it. For me, the conversation is going to be, and I thought I made this point at the last thing, A, B, and C. There are several facets about either one, like about all three of those that are no, there's no way I would approve any one of those. Maybe it's because there was some further discussions, but at the point where we're at looking at, we'll get high school 7 in 10 years. Sure we will. And then in 20 years, there'll be a board sitting up here talking about how they're still trying to look for land for high school 7. So to me, given the current condition of the state of the building at North Stafford, the constancy of the need for repairs, I think any scenario which puts that building at, I'm not worried about like a 99 or whatever, because I get that we can't actually reach perfect medium there.
Right.
But for me, I have to look at the life of that building, because we don't have the money to keep fixing it either, right? That's the bottom line too. And the more kids in that school, the harder that building takes. And maybe it's because that's what we face with Hartwood Elementary, right? And looking at trying to decompress that building a little bit more to hopefully give it a little bit of a longer lifespan over the course of times. And I think that's where I stand looking at the numbers. And for me, to see the red across the board, like and it's not 10 years away, it's 8. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is in 2022, so we're only in 8 years, we're back to 106%, which is more than we are now. So I think we need to be very strategic about how we look at reassigning students. And I think that it all has to weigh into it. It has to be the transportation factor. It has to be all the things that we've talked about. But I think the bigger point in looking at this, and we've had the discussions, it's the impact on the building itself. So that's where I stand. And that takes out 3 for me, at least.
It takes out, A, B, and C.
Yeah, so for me, I'm just looking at the like Ms. Randall said, the balcony eye view. For me, I'm looking at free and reduced lunch and English language learners. And so when I look at that, A looks okay to me, E looks okay to me, F looks okay to me, F1 looks okay to me, and G looks okay to me. The other ones are ones that are really pushing it even further than I think it needs to be. But
I
that's
have the same one circled.
right.
You're gonna have to.
A, and what
I was
else?
gonna say, relist.
Sure. So I said A, E, F, F1, and G.
Ms. Guy, can you weigh in? We'd like to hear you.
Yeah, I know, I'm thinking, lady. No, well, we need to do this with a consensus, and so I wanted to look at what you were saying with the lens of Sarah Chase, Dr. Sarah Chase, so. I had looked at hers, because she said only one. Y'all did multiples, that's why it's harder. So I do not like planning to put schools in the red, but I do understand that it may not happen. But I also understand that this is Stafford, and it may happen. And, or maybe like for scenario A, which I don't hate, but maybe one of the two red schools only go red, right? They don't all have, they might not both go red. My sensitivity is to all of the residents of the Aquia District, because we are building that school at Brook Point, and we've got Stafford Middle traffic, Brook Point traffic, and the new elementary school traffic, and the current residents who've been in that area, and then the newer residents, it's just gonna be a nightmare for them. I trust 100% that staff is formulating something that is amazing that I can't come up with, but it's still gonna be a lot of people in a small area at those bell schedule times. So if we had the worst-case scenario and Brooke went to 105%, I won't be on the board that long. But that's not the legacy that I want to vote to leave the people who I love, who I don't even know yet, right? Like, that just makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But I don't mind everything else with A, I don't mind, except for what if it takes us too long to get that high school? That,
Is there any plans that you do prefer?
yes. Mr. White, what plan was it that I liked? I just want to make sure I get it right.
It was F and F1, I think.
Okay, I think it was F and F1? Okay, because I'll tell you, we got so many daggone plans, it's hard, and you did not put my name on it. So how do I remember?
Oh, and
So-
can I retract G? Because I just noticed that G has, that when we open a new high school, Forge will be at 99%, and that's not a good idea. So, yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
I'm sorry, Dr. Chase, did you actually say H or H1? Was that, what, I didn't.
I said G.
Yeah, but earlier,
Oh.
have you put H1 on there? Okay.
Yeah.
all right.
Dr. Chase, what were you saying about Forge?
So I said G, if you look at Plan G, the year that the new high school's open, 2026.
Which chart?
It's page 5.
Okay,
Colonial Forge would be at 99% when we've just opened a new high school.
okay, thank you.
And that, to me,
Ooh,
is
yeah.
probably not the idea. Like, I would be upset, you open a new high school and my high school is still at 99%.
What, and I just want to point out this is a great graphic for a chart.
I know,
just
I
to
appreciate
show.
these,
And
a lot.
that's a lot of stress on Brook Point.
because I did them myself.
So
Oh,
that's-
But I didn't know until this
That's
afternoon,
hard,
so I didn't have time to do
but-
this. This is awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
across the board for each of the scenarios in 2032. So instead of looking at it from like a,
it's like Brook Point can't catch a break with y'all.
yeah.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
I mean,
out in 2032, you're right.
right.
This is not awesome.
I mean, it definitely makes the point.
But you can
for
look
high
at the
school
29.
7, But
And Dr. Chase, I do want to confirm that the countywide average is 37%.
My
It is-
back of the envelope calculation was right?
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. And that's at the high school level, correct?
That's at high
High
school
school
only.
level?
That's all
Okay,
we're talking about.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So, Mr. Wright, she's right. We spoke about this in your meeting, and I was like, are all these scenarios, even the ones that my illustrious co-board members are coming up with, we're just packing Brook Point. So, I kind of don't like any of them.
And on page 7, in comparing the long-term capacity estimates, looks like F1 and G1 has Brook Point at capacity, barely over. G1 has it and projected to be under.
So in that case, then I think we want to make sure that if we have to look at a small spot redistrict between
gonna have
that
to come out of
point,
Brook.
then it's going to have to come out of Brook Point at some point. But also, we need to be able to make sure that there's none of the things that we're talking about now, no domino effects, no having to create islands, no doing all of that stuff. And I think that's one of the bigger factors in looking forward and having to plan backwards for the unknown, you know. Anybody have a crystal ball? And if so, what are the lottery numbers that come up? No, I'm just kidding. But I think that, oh, we could build a new school with one. So I mean, I know we are definitely waiting for Ms. Sigmund. So let me just ask one question in terms
You need
of,
to weigh in too.
yes. Did you want to go?
No,
Are you sure?
I'm listening.
Okay. So in each of the first scenarios, we were concerned about a cutout that's happening at the top part of, and these are only in the first scenarios, about the little green piece on, and I have scenario B in my hand, so I'll
Okay.
pick it up. The one that's up here, I think it's the area behind Lowe's. And I think we had all agreed that we wanted to keep those kids together potentially and not have, not have them separated out as a cutout piece. Can you review why they were originally chosen?
Yeah, there are separate communities there. There are, I believe, 2 different mobile home communities. In scenario B, one of the 2 is assigned to Brook Point, whereas in scenario A, both communities are assigned. To Brook Point. Yes. And so,
A scenario where they are reincorporated back into North Stafford, correct? And that's.
yes,
So that's in D,
yes.
E has them out again.
Yep.
I think. Okay, F and F1 has them out. Hold on. Is she, okay. All right, so we have a good deal of the
G1.
scenarios, right,
G1 has them there.
okay.
Yeah, so there's a good variety. One of the things in particular with that community, if you're looking at the free and reduced lunch numbers, it has an impact of about 3%. So wherever that community goes, there's a 3% change.
Carrie.
Swing
Okay.
in where they're assigned, yeah.
Mr. White, can I ask you a question? The free and reduced lunch numbers changed a lot with that new data that you got. Would you come up with any kind of different plan with new data, or would it just, would everything just stay the same? Like, if you had that information, is there like a different plan that you would potentially pull together?
Quite honestly, no. Because free and reduced lunch, it was one of the considerations. It depends on who developed the plan, right? Because in scenarios A, B, and C, the initial boundary scenarios, it was considered, but other factors were considered as well. So depending on who crafted it, you know, yeah. Some plans were crafted, you know, Brook Point, let's get that number down. Some plans were crafted, high school 6, let's make this happen. So it just depends on what the person was after.
I just wanted to know if you had, like, with the change data, if that would change anything. But I do understand that you're also looking at trying to have everything contiguous and not have islands, and, you know, I gotcha. I just was curious.
I got you, yeah. So for me, I'm looking a lot at enrollment balance in the long term, so that ranked higher in my thinking.
Yeah, I just think that we have to be considerate of, yes, transportation, but we have to balance enrollment, and that means I just don't feel comfortable putting 1 in 3 students as an ESOL student in any of our high schools. And then we have to consider where that capacity is gonna be on the outward years. But I don't think we can seriously consider 2032 because I think that's all speculative. So it's, I'd rather see Colonial Forge have more students because I feel like we have more directions that we could move students, more places that if we could pull them into Stafford High, or we could pull them into Brook Point, or we could push them into, it just feels like there's more opportunities there.
Did you have a list of the ones that you would, because Dr. Chase had given a list of the ones that were more, or that she was more favorable towards, as it were? And I'm putting words in your mouth, Dr. Chase, but
My favorables are A, E, F, and F1. And I think that A and B were very similar. C was the outlier. But I feel like that puts too much pressure on North Stafford and Brook Point because their capacity is pretty high pretty quickly. I gotta see where that is. There's way too many numbers.
How about you, Ms. Guy? What are your thoughts?
is it just F1? Because that's the only one you mentioned.
F and G, I thought. I mean, I don't like.
Because Colonial Forge is at 100% in G by,
Welcome.
It's funny that nobody came down this way. They all came in.
Ms. Halsted, what are your thoughts?
So I was about, to be honest with you, I mean, in terms of just open for discussion, F1, and I would consider talking about H1, discussing H1, but those were my three. I was kind of on a rule of three lately, so those were my three.
Could you share what you like about H1, just because you're probably looking at something different than I am, so I'd be curious what's,
Yeah, I mean, so just in terms of the map itself and how it lays out, I hadn't considered going north instead of to the east end of it. So it had a balance factor from just in terms of I felt like it shifted what we had discussed here up. And so in looking at it, it was open for discussion to me, just because it puts us, less on the side of one. However, to Dr. Warner's point, the Colonial Forge piece, it probably is the most pliable part here, where there's more of a centralized location for kids that we could, if we had to, realign, even though I hope we don't. But honestly, that was it, just in terms of considering the facet of the map, was that it kind of took this and went like that. And so it felt like it stood it up, and so it was.
yeah, and I know transportation spent a lot of time with H and H1, and that's what I liked about it. The only
Right.
thing is that it puts so many, it's like 1 in 3 ESOL students are going to be in North Stafford. and
Yeah.
some of
As
the
well
other
as,
schools.
that's the highest free and reduced number, that 55. And I just feel like if our high school average is 37, that just seems not right to put 55%, or have them be at 55% at North. And,
One, that transportation. Yes. Wait, okay, I just want to make sure. I'm looking at it.
No,
H1 is a
H-
variation of H, but I don't think it's really, H and F are probably a lot different.
H is the only one that incorporates Hampton Oaks and goes north.
And it was looking more at a Route 1
No.
kind of as the boundary to prevent the buses from crossing over each other.
What I really would like to know is transportation, or if transportation looked at the scenarios aside from H, the one that they created, and what was their most favorable out of the ones that we were looking at before they made their own. That's what I thought we were asking for. I'm fine that they did it. I mean, that doesn't, we just did not, we thought that's what we were asking for, and we were not clear with what we asked for. So do you happen to know which one transportation thought was ease of operation, the best, from A to F?
I can't say I have that answer.
That
They
is an
did go-
answer that we need.
yeah.
We
They
board
did go
members want-
through, Lionel went through it with them in detail, each scenario yesterday, and it wasn't necessarily ranking them, but the kind of the pros and cons of each one, and hey, this is gonna be a trouble spot, potentially, or this is what they liked about each one.
But we don't know that information, so it's not helpful for me right now. I want to
Yeah.
know what transportation thinks of these scenarios, because that means something to me if I'm going to vote on these. Like, if all things are equal for two, and then transportation's like, that one is the best, or, you know, if they rank them, then I might go with that one to make transportation's job a little bit easier.
Yeah, so with all of the scenarios, there are challenges in routing kids. So they pretty much pointed out different challenges, different potential choke points, or where traffic may get slowed down here, or, so with all of them, they had something to say. Most of the time, it wasn't a lot of pros, but it was quick to point out the cons, quite honestly, because that's sort of how they think. They did make a recommendation, I believe it was Planning Unit 250. It's the Crow's Nest Planning Unit. They did highly recommend that we consider reassigning that back to Brook Point because of a concern that there's only one way in to Ravens Road that they have to go. And just because of access, that was a request that they had.
And how many students are there?
Not many, 3
Yeah.
right now. Yeah. But they still have.
No, I'm just kidding.
Mr. Fulmer, is that something that we could do after? I mean, because there may be other routes, I would like them to look and say, hey, if there's 3 students at this Crow's Nest site, is that something we could do after the fact, just with the superintendent would have the authority to do that?
Yes.
Or should we do it up front? Okay,
Yeah.
do it up front.
Then it needs to be in the, like, when we're getting public comment on
Yeah.
Tuesday, they need to know that they got moved back to Brook Point, right? Or do we? I mean, it's just, like, none of the plans show them staying
Staying.
at Brook.
Yeah,
So I don't want that.
That has to be.
Well, I think we would have to notify them that their planning unit is no longer being considered for a move, and that's probably the simpler message to send.
I'm
But
sorry,
I
is
would
that
also
3?
make it clear to
So
the
we can
pub, I'm sorry, I would also make it clear to the public that if we're in a condition like
Yes,
that it is
correct.
only 3
Correct,
students,
yeah.
because I think it
Yes.
might be confusing for folks, and they might be like, hey, you moved, so this is 3 kids, that's a lot different than 30 kids or 20 kids. So I just would, like, if we get the message out, I would like for us to also include that the impact is 3 kids.
Okay.
Ms. Sigmund? I would like to have prior to the public hearing, the scenarios that are under consideration. And if we are making an adjustment to a scenario that's here, then that has to show up as an adjustment, because I think, as Dr. Shea says, if people are coming and commenting, you know, we have to be transparent in what's under consideration.
Is there a number that the board wants to go with for like a final number? Like, are we shooting for top 3 scenarios, top 4? Like, I don't know, because there's so many of them that,
I think we're still waiting for Ms. Sigmund and Ms. Healy to weigh in, because I think for some of us, we have 4, some of us, we have 3, 2.
So
So I think Ms. Sigmund and Ms. Healy, if they want to weigh in.
can I share the research in psychology? More than 3 choices, people tend to be unhappy, whereas 3 choices is like the optimal number of choices. So
That seems like a big cut to
if we
this
could
pile.
have just 3, that would be a whole lot easier for everyone.
second. I
Agreed.
second.
Nope. So I will weigh in. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. 95, there was traffic. So for the Garrisonville district, the scenarios that would be amenable start with B, C, D, F1, and H1. That being said, I was listening in the car, and the last thing I heard before I turned my car off was Ms. Halsted talking about the green section. I feel really strongly about not moving those neighbors. They already attend North, they're embedded in North. We're moving them because of economic status. And I don't think that's fair. If they are part of a community that already needs more support from our community, the answer to that is not taking them out of the place they are and have that support and have the relationships built and move them to a completely different school. Especially if the purpose in that is to make numbers look good on paper. And these are children. This is not just a spreadsheet. I remind myself of that every time I look at these. So while my district, can live through some of these changes and it will be uncomfortable, I think the higher needs our kids, the higher needs a move of any sort is. And I feel like a lot of these scenarios could be made better for the county if we let that neighborhood stay at North.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is just jot down on a piece of paper. I'm gonna start now, so I just want to make sure I got this right. You said B, C, and what were the others?
So for Garrisonville District, the changes that impact my constituents that would not, I think, upset too many people would be B, C, D, F1, and H1.
Okay,
But even within those, I think H1 is the only one that does not have that green section, if Ms. Halsted looked at them more recently than I would. So that would be, for me, the win-win. I understand that, like the crow's nest, if we opt in any of these scenarios to not move students, it is probably a plus versus it would be a benefit versus a detriment, a beneficial change versus a detrimental change. I don't think that people are gonna get upset for keeping children in a school. So that's the type of change I think would be okay. But again, that's just me.
Yeah, H1 is definitely one I could not consider.
I understand that.
Yeah.
'Cause it's-
Ms. Healy?
Well, speaking for my district, D would be my first choice. That's one that Ms. Sigmund and I suggested early on. I understand there's not going to be support for that, but I want to just state that for the record. Looking at every other scenario reassigns that district that has, I'm not sure the planning unit number, but Arbor Glen and Marshall Estates that have been to every one of our meetings, every one of our town halls. D is the only one that would not, reassign them. I just want to recognize that. My concern about some of the other ones is the number of students that are being moved. And my general philosophy is to keep the students being moved to a minimum. And I recognize the students being assigned to the new school are non-negotiable. I mean, they're the same in every scenario, and no one has had much to really object to in that. And likewise, I think with Stafford High School, I don't think there's any real changes to Stafford High School. So Stafford High School and High School 6, and there's one I think you mentioned. Dr.
We're getting
Chase.
78 students, well, now it'll be 75 students out of Brook,
Right.
which is
Pretty much under every
Right, yep, they're all the
scenario.
same, they're all the same, yeah.
Right. So the real question is, the movement of students among North Stafford, Colonial Forge, Mountain View, and Brook. I want to do the scenario that makes the most sense and that would move the least number of students, but I also recognize the boundaries. I mean, we have to look at, coloring within these lines, because we don't want to have islands, we want to get away from that. But I would like to try to keep students at their schools to the extent that we can, because I think there is a relationship among the communities, among the families, among the schools, the school staff, and that's going to be disruptive when we move. So we're going to have to move, but if we can minimize that, that's what I'd be looking for. I think I appreciate the updated numbers, and I think there are some variances, and it's certainly something to consider. But my first consideration is not going to be free and reduced, because you've all heard me say this before. I'm not going to say someone has to move to increase a number at a school, because that inconveniences the very students that we're trying to help. I mean, in terms of the free and reduced. But the subdivision that you talked about down in back of Lowe's, they have been moved, not with the high schools, but in the elementary schools, they were moved. They were moved to Park Ridge because there wasn't room at Moncure, then they were moved to Hampton Oaks, I think, or they were, or maybe it was the other way around, but they have been moved on many occasions, because it is a larger development, and they're, somewhat centrally placed, but I would like to try to keep them at North, because I think they have the established, contacts and ties, with North Stafford. I have some very serious reservations about H, recognizing that transportation says, okay, this is gonna be the simplest, we can just, bus these kids around, but H, all of Hampton Oaks is pretty darn close to North Stafford, and they've been there a long time. If there's no other options, I certainly wouldn't, would understand, but I think there are other options, and we're talking about moving possibly under H1, 500 students out of North. And anytime you move, 1/4 of the school, that's gonna have a change. Same thing with Forge. We don't have a choice with Forge because of the 886 that are going to high school 6. I mean, there are gonna be some fundamental changes in a high school if we're moving half of the students out, even though we're gonna replace them, with new students. But that's gonna be an adjustment, and I think that's something that we're gonna have to, have the superintendent's gonna have to work with staff and with the principals to make sure that we do have the best transition we can have, because we're talking about some pretty significant, changes in populations, which is understandable because we're opening, a brand-new school, and also because we've had this island for how many years? Over 10, probably. I mean, it's just been there. So, that's, I'm willing to listen, to what people have to say. I think, yes, ideally, we'd have 3 scenarios, but I don't want to put an arbitrary number on it, because if there's one that weighs in pretty close to one of the other ones, I want to leave it open. So this is a huge emotional impact on families, even though we're not talking about the coming year, but a year from now, it is. So I want to make sure we give them all due consideration.
So have we eliminated anything?
So far, and some of the board members has spoke earlier, but I didn't get a chance to jot down
So
their
we have
preferences.
not had, let's see, A, B, C, D, E. Nope, none. Nope, none, because, I mean, we have some.
I haven't heard
Look,
anybody.
the thing that I find interesting about D is D loses students and gains none. And filling Mountain View is like one of the hardest things, and it keeps Mountain View at like 88%. And I just feel like, they lose their students that were gonna go to high school 6, but they are not gaining anything, all the way across. So that's a little bit hard for me, because it's still putting North Stafford at 106, of course, everything considered, and it also gives them 54% free and reduced. I know that's not a high consideration for some, but when the high school average is 37, that just doesn't seem right.
So can I say, I haven't heard anyone strongly support G or G1.
Ms. Guy said G?
Did you?
Yes. Okay.
I think your plans, Ms. Guy, were F and F1. I think those were the ones that we worked on. F and F1?
F and F1 came up for, I wrote F
So
and G
G1
for you.
F1 is, if I'm not mistaken, the changes between F1 and G1 are putting that area, putting that green spot back in, and I'm only gonna call it green spot for now because I'll never remember.
No, the changes between F and F1, so
No, between
we,
F1 and G1.
oh, G1.
It puts the, there's a
This is
few
why we need to
minor
reduce.
tweaks in it, but they're pretty similar, but it adds that group back into North Stafford and doesn't separate them. Right?
F1 puts it at Brook Point.
Yes. So
No.
G1 has.
Yes, F1 does, G1 doesn't. So, but I think we can easily say if we're gonna, if F1 is one of the preferred scenarios, but we want to just alter it and put that crowd back in, on,
Back in North Stafford?
back in North
The
Stafford.
problem is it will increase the free and reduced lunch numbers by 3%. So is there something we could pull out that would,
Well,
Yeah.
doesn't it create somewhat of an island? If I'm looking here, you've got the
It's
The
not an
little-
island,
the
it's-
little
it's
blip over the
attached-
green,
yeah,
over here.
It's still attached to green.
over here.
Yeah, it's still attached to green.
But that's,
only a
isn't
road.
this 95 or Route 1? I don't know.
No, I think it was a.
Are you talking about F1, the area north?
No, I think it's just.
F, okay, let me see here.
The interstate
Yeah,
is right
F
here.
is contiguous at the
Oh,
top.
It is 95.
Yeah.
It's totally separated from this side over here.
It's on Route 1. That's Route 1 there too.
No, it's in back of Lowe's, off Garrisonville Road.
Right, but here's Route 1. It goes right with it.
It's not on
This is where
Route 1.
95 and Route 1.
Right, but this subdivision does not touch Route 1. This is on this side. This is, if that's Route 1.
Mr. White, could you please help me?
Mhm.
Apart from that green section that we were discussing, what is the difference between G1 and F1?
Okay,
Because they look similar to me,
okay.
but I can't figure out, so I'm just doing some.
Free and reduce is 6% difference.
Well, I'm just saying, and 3%, exactly, because that green section we've already identified is only 3%. So what is the other 3% change? Because, for
Oh.
example, if I'm like, I like F1, but let's let those kids stay at North, that should only bring North Stafford up to 40, or 51, bring Brook Point back down to 41, unless that they don't have the same impact at Brook Point that they would at North because of the denominator. But it should, and then it will also help Brook's capacity to not be over 101%. I've got two taking middle school math, Miss Halsted. I've got to know my denominators.
Denominators, so many syllables.
So which
What about the
school
numerator?
had the biggest,
Oh my
what
God, it's the
are
same
you
number.
speaking of with the change? Was it Colonial Forge, was it North Stafford?
Well, I'm trying to figure out the difference between F1. So F1 is at 48.
Okay, for North Stafford, okay.
And then for G1, North Stafford is at 54. I can see that part of it is allowing that neighborhood to stay at North Stafford, but that should only be a 3% differential. So I can't
Mhm.
identify on the kind of these maps what the, it's also some Route 1, I think.
It's up here. It's, if you look at Forge,
Mhm.
look at the top part of where Forge touches north. It's not in the,
Oh, we're
it's not
talking
in
about
F1,
Park
but it's in
Ridge.
G1. It's this
Correct.
right
Park
Oh, yeah.
Ridge Community has
right
been
here.
taken out in
Yeah, we need,
G1 and that,
okay,
Right there.
that's the difference.
yes.
See, that's not here.
So
It's at north.
we could look at F1 and allow the Woodstream area to stay and not go all the way up to 54. That would keep stable numbers at North, but it would reduce capacity.
So,
I think that's a good place to start,
Right
otherwise
now,
we're still
I mean-
flipping through.
Right now, I have you and Dr. Chase as thumbs up for A, and no one else has said A.
Oh, you can eliminate A. Let's eliminate A.
Okay. And then Ms. Sigmund is the only one for B and C at this moment. Is
That's
anybody
fine.
else wanting to just leave it in for a discussion?
No.
No? Okay. And then D, Ms.
Sorry, Lionel.
Sigmund and Ms. Healy are the wants for that one. Anybody else?
No.
No?
Those numbers make filling Mountain View, that scenario makes filling Mountain View impossible,
Correct.
almost impossible. So
Okay.
it's just a no.
So then there are three of us, Dr. Warner, Dr. Chase, and myself for E. Is there anyone else who would want to consider E?
I see that. You're talking about E?
E, is there, it's Dr. Chase, Dr. Warner, and myself for E. Is there anyone else for scenario E?
I mean, I don't really care about E. I
Okay,
mean, it can,
we can eliminate E. Way to go, ladies.
Well,
We're-
we have to be
Well-
kind of careful, because we can't eliminate
don't-
to get down to, I mean. we
We're
have to-
taking it down to three, and we have like
I'm-
5 left.
I'm
Okay.
okay with leaving E in there.
You're okay with
For
leaving?
purposes of discussion.
Okay, so
sure.
we'll leave E for a discussion, sure. We're on F, and I think there's Dr. Chase, Dr. Warner, myself, Ms. Guy, Ms. Halsted, all say F for discussion purposes. Just, I think we said both.
I think you said both.
You're no for F?
F1?
You guys can keep them,
I'm looking.
Yeah.
Because y'all already are keeping in E, and that's where Brookpoint is the only one.
It's only for discussion purposes,
I know,
not
but it's
keeping.
only for discussion purposes, that means it's an option. So,
Not to finalize. We're gonna try to go down to 3. I agree, I agree. I'm fine with that.
protecting our people, 'cause
That's
there's
fine.
nobody else on this program doing it. Okay.
That's not true.
Um,
But anyways, F.
F1.
F is,
F1's in, F's
1, 2,
out.
3, 4, 5 of us said F. So 5 say F, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us say F1,
Okay.
okay? So 5 of us take F out, because 5 of us said yes.
Wait a
I'm
minute.
gonna wait on that one.
We're leaving F1 in and taking F out.
Dr.
She said the
Warner,
quiet part out loud.
what is wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding. You're speaking my language, it's okay. All right, so take F out, leave F1 in. Right now, we have 1 for G, Ms. Guy. Anyone else want to hold on to G?
Oh, I don't care. If-
You don't
if
care?
she want- if
To
Maya
hold on
wants
for
to discuss it,
discussion?
That's fine.
Well,
And G1.
G and G1?
I'm all right with discussing G.
You're okay with discussing G? Okay.
I'm not sure, what's the difference between G and G1? It's a big impact on Mountain View, looks like.
I think, Ms. Sigmund, did you do G or G1?
No, G1. Right.
Who did G1?
Who-
I did G1?
Who?
No, I didn't do G1, but it's the only one where Brookpoint isn't over 100.
G, I would do G over G1, but
G over G1?
But G actually puts that group, your group that you're fighting for, back at Brook Point and out of North Stafford.
correct. I think G,
1.
so G and G1 just, I think, G is basically what I was hoping for my district specifically. G1 has Park Ridge moved, and I had thought about, that we had discussed keeping them at North. So I don't know who moved them in G1, because that was not
Okay,
a
so
request
are
of
we
mine.
yes G in G1 or no G in G1?
I mean, for the Garrisonville district,
Well,
G
we're
has
just
the
talking for
same
everybody.
moves as the other ones I've supported, so I could leave G in.
G versus G1?
I would leave G
Correct.
in.
G, okay. So we've got discussion for G,
Except for Ms. Guy? Okay.
okay. And then H, no one had H. and Ms. Halsted and Ms. Sigmund had H1.
And I can't support, I can't support H1.
Okay,
That's,
I can't support H1.
it's too big a change for North,
Okay.
in my view.
Okay,
Do
so
we
we're,
agree?
Do we? I have
G,
four.
Dr. Chase and I agree?
I'm just gonna point out
I agree.
that
Ooh, I
G
know.
has, G only ever keeps Mountain View at, under 80, they're at 87% across the board.
It's just
So-
for discussion.
all right, so we're at E, F, F1, G, and H1 for discussion.
I thought we took out F.
Oh, sorry, you're right. So we're E, F1, G, H1. I don't know. Who's supporting
Who's
H1?
supporting
Ms.
H1?
Ms. Halsted, were you as well? You would consider that one.
I would
So-
consider it as well, but
Okay. So
So
it
does
looks
that mean
like,
it's out?
it looks like H1 is out. So we're at E, F1, and G. Well done, ladies. There's our three.
Can we get a vote on that this time?
Well, let's,
however,
I want to look at these and discuss them individually before we vote, because
We're
this
not
is a
voting on
pretty,
anything.
well, but we're going to eventually vote to eliminate some.
Okay.
But this is a pretty quick view, and we've got so many pages, and I just want to have that discussion before we hit the
I would
bottom line.
also like, again, to revisit that section to stay at North.
As long as it doesn't dump on them, no.
They're there now. You're just
No.
not taking them out.
No, but if
F2,
I'm not,
F2 adds Woodstream back, keeps Woodstream at North, that green area.
Okay, keeps Woodstream at, no, got it. Okay.
And if, does E,
I also need to know, like, we just,
I think it's like 300.
oh, for like how many students have moved?
And gets transportation's weigh in on that too, so that we know if it's more efficient to keep it there, or
Okay.
if it doesn't matter.
It's got to be, unless you're comparing it with something else, it's got to be a whole lot easier to go up Garrisonville Road in the morning and afternoon than to go from Stafford Marketplace, basically, or in back of that, down to Brook Point, as we all know from tonight.
Yeah, and I do know that was one of their recommendations,
Can we, can we get those numbers?
to have it to North.
F2.
Can we get those numbers?
Yeah, we're not moving it to North, we're leaving them at North, which is students we're not moving, which I'm going to support.
So,
Okay,
so what we're
wait.
saying is for the meeting on Tuesday, before that meeting, we would like a scenario that has that for public comment.
Correct.
Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Mhm.
F2 was gonna keep Woodstream at North. Okay.
And then we would like all the numbers that go with
Yeah,
that.
because maybe
Okay.
there's somebody that needs to come out.
And I just want to go on record because I am the queen of petty. We just said it's got to be so much easier to go down Garrisonville Road instead of all the way to Brook Point going up Route 1. But y'all put the elementary school there where the kids are going now down Garrisonville Road, and now they're going to be going up to Brook Point. I'm just saying, just saying.
I'm not aware of anyone going from Garrisonville Road over to the new, oh, well, we haven't even done that redistricting yet. We'll keep that in mind.
It's cool in the quiet district. My point is, it's okay for some and it's not. We're not really consistent. That's my point. That's my point. Let's go on.
I think we're talking apples and oranges. I'll be happy to have that discussion when we have our elementary school redistricting, when I think it's relevant, because that's when we're going to be looking at the students that are going to be moved. Because I doubt there's any coming from Garrisonville Road down there.
Yeah.
Well, I would certainly like to review them, because this was pretty quick.
All right.
So we'll
okay,
start with
you all
E.
confused me.
Start off
Have
with
we
E.
eliminated the ones and we're down to 3, is that correct?
E,
We're down to
F1, and
4
G.
essentially, because we're going to
We're
add
down
an
to 4.
F2
Okay, we're gonna
with
add
that
an
green
F2.
section.
Okay.
But we'll look,
Which I think is what you recommended, Ms. Halsted.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I took these out. I'm gonna put them over here now so I don't confuse them with the rest of my thoughts.
And all of the scenarios are going to move Crow's
Yes.
Nest out.
Yes, that will be.
Oh, I think I,
And so you'll give us those numbers too?
Yes.
Okay. E, F1, which is gonna be F2, which I don't understand yet. G.
Can I just mention one broad topic, which was my feedback from transportation when we met with them? And all of these scenarios are gonna fall into that bucket, so I apologize in advance, but I'm gonna go on record, because if we have problems in 2 or 3 years with transportation, I wanna make sure it was clear that we communicated this. Going significantly over Route 1, and now every bus going north from Brook Point is gonna be crossing paths with Colonial Forge buses. Colonial Forge buses now have to go, and Brook Point will be dealing with the same Route 1 mess that you guys dealt with tonight. So their biggest feedback was to try not to cross Route 1 with the Colonial Forge boundary zone. And that's everything that guided their decision of going north for that scenario H and then what was H1. And so we are now broadening that zone and making it bigger. It will create more transportation challenges compared to the other ones.
It's just, it's not the only consideration, transportation.
I understand that. I just want to go on
Just-
record.
I want to go on
It
record
will
as saying,
create
I could have gotten
challenges.
But,
behind
Mr.
H1.
Fulmer, didn't you tell us we're going to have fewer transportation challenges when we open high school 6 because of the transportation?
Only if
of
we
the
don't
new
create
schools?
new
That
ones.
is true, but
So
it
we
doesn't
have to look
mean,
at the whole picture.
but it doesn't mean
I'm
we
just teasing
create
you.
other ones just because we're solving one problem. I don't want to be 3 years down the road and say, geez, look at what we're dealing with now that we could have fixed.
We're just trying to make sure that future boards aren't bored with their job, that's all.
So we're gonna go through these again.
Wait till we get to 2
We're gonna, can you pull up,
I have it on my monitor here. Can the IT help us out with putting it on? There we go.
there we
Thank
go.
you. So we're gonna
Okay,
start with
we're gonna
E.
start with E.
Okay.
Yeah, but wait a second. I just want to go back to what Mr. Fulmer said, because that makes sense, but why wasn't that information explained to us in that way at the very beginning when we first started, before we ever sat down? By explaining to us, hey, when you guys go in and give
Yes.
your input, you should try your hardest not to expand this one location. The way you just put it at the 9th hour or the 11th hour or whatever, it makes sense, but why are we just finding that, like,
Well, because they're reviewing scenarios as they're created, so they don't know what scenario to review until we've created it. So
I will say that
they did
option-
review it last week. and
But
that's
the, but the
feedback
Colonial
provided.
Forge zone is the Colonial Forge zone, and they already know, I'm sure they knew, like, we definitely don't want that zone to grow, the way you just explained it, so we could have known
Well,
that,
and-
that.
and
Nobody
the
would have known
original
that we would go that
ABC
far.
all have that happening. The
Yeah.
very first 3 plans that were
Yeah.
developed by staff
That's
all
right.
did
Option
that.
A
And that
looks
was
very
Lionel, and then
similar.
it was creating it, and then going back to say, all right, stat, like transportation.
Okay.
Oh, I'm fine with going under the bus. I just want to be clear, in A, B, and C, just to give you some thinking behind it, in our CIP, we have a high school plan, and I believe it's in 2033 it opens. The thinking being, if we got that school, wouldn't it be great if the crowding was already up there? So I was thinking ahead to the next boundary
That makes
change
sense.
process. So,
And I feel like if we could today secure 2033, high school 7,
Yeah.
like if that were on the books, a done deal, this would be a little bit of an easier option. But given the history of this county, it's not something that we can think about right now, because there's no way around the delays that they'll see. I just don't see that all of a sudden in 2032, the supervisors are gonna sit up and be like, get it done. Like, I just don't see that happening. And to be honest with you, I would love to be proved wrong on this one, but I think there's some very, I get that this is all emotional for families and kids and whatever, but I think that this board is obligated to kind of take their own emotion out of it a little bit, because we have to get this right to the extent that we can get this right. And to Ms. Guy's point from the transportation perspective, I don't think there's gonna be any, thing that's not like Band-Aid and glue gunning things, you know what I mean, for the county right now. But at the end of the day, I feel like we have to have an obligation to kind of take the raw emotion out of it and start to look at this more strategically and how this is really gonna impact the fact that we can't rely on a high school 7 being built in it would have to open in 2033, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it would have to open in 2033, so.
Which
you're
is only
telling me
7
in-
years after this one opens, and
Right,
that's.
so I just feel like that's an important point, like, I get this is emotional for our families, nobody doesn't recognize that. But this board, I think, has to keep its emotion out of it and start to look at really doing this the right way. And that's maybe something I only feel, but I just don't think that we can go into this with the same amount of emotion that everyone else does. And that's not to say we're not empathetic to the emotion they feel. That's just to say, there are so many decisions, like, when I look at these maps, my headache is never ending because of where our schools are positioned and how we've done this in the past. It's like, okay, well, we'll just move these people over here and those people over there, and then, oh, you know what, those are emotional decisions, and I just think for this point, we're at the point.
Very specific things that we need. We need to optimize the use of Mountain View. We have to keep the strain off of North Stafford because it's our oldest school. We have to kind of try to minimize the strain on Brook Point because there's so many schools at that location. And we have to try to balance the school attendance with ESOL students, free and reduced lunch, and SPED. And I think those are all, and I think that's all those are the things that I went into this looking for. I agree. So.
So, option E. We're gonna put it up. Ms. Healy, was there a conversation you wanted to have about each, or did you just wanna see them all, or?
Okay.
Could, Mr. White, distinguish these three that we're narrowed it down to?
Okay.
can.
All right. Let's start off with E. I'm going to go to the next page, which looks at some of the numbers that we have. All right, looks like North Stafford is in great shape.
Lionel, just for the record, that says scenario E on the left side and scenario A on the right, so I'm
It's
not
a
sure.
typo. I
It's a
apologize.
typo.
Oh, all
there.
right, so it's not like it was mispictured. Okay.
No, it's a typo. It's E. I apologize. I had a lot going on. Yeah. Let's see. So we have, in this scenario, if you're looking in the out years, we have 2 schools slated to be over. And this is going to be consistent in all of them. You're going to see 2 schools over. The question becomes, which 2 schools? And these are the latest, this is the latest data we have, the latest projections. So there's been no change in the fact that 2 schools are going to be over. In terms of students being reassigned, here's where we are with that. All right, so this is E. Let's take a look at F1. Oh, boy. Let me pull up on my other screen here. Sorry. We have a lot of scenarios, and quite honestly, if I don't have it right in front of me, I can't figure that out. Forge into Mountain View, so that would be Augustine North, and there's also,
Also moves Austin Ridge and Winding Creek neighborhoods into Forge out of North. E has them staying at North except for the Winding Creek neighborhood, which pushes out to Mountain View.
and because F1, the Augustine North or Mountain View's boundary extends east, that pushes the Colonial Forge to extend east because it doesn't go north in this scenario. So, I'm sorry, it's going east. Colonial Forge is going eastward? But it doesn't look that different from E. Okay, so let me take a look at E.
Yeah, the Mountain View, but not the Colonial
pushing further east than scenario E does.
No, yeah, with the exception of Mountain View, yes.
But it is pulling, F1 is pulling, what neighborhoods are those that are getting pulled out of north into Forge?
Autumn Ridge and Winding Creek.
Yep, oh, okay, I'm ready to, no, I have my map, I'm ready to go, sorry. All right, let's see here. All right, let's take a look at this. Yes, so what we just said was true. Also looks like there's one community in scenario E, I believe that's Winding Creek Community. That's a planning unit that's assigned to Mountain View in scenario E, but it is not assigned to Mountain View in scenario F1.
Correct. Would not move, it would keep them at,
So F2, are we saying, I just want to make sure we're clear, we want to keep that entire community? Or, okay, so, got it. Yeah, so that's Woodstream and another, but yes, both will be included. That, everything east of, going west of 95, that's green, Brook Point will be reassigned. North Stafford currently will be reassigned back to North Stafford. Yep.
That's the only difference in F1 and F2?
Yes, yes.
So are we gonna like then call F1 F2 now and get rid of it?
Mhm. Yep. Okay, so now I guess if we can, are we gonna look at scenario G now? All right. Okay, scenario G, we have the communities. This is regular G. I have regular G, and yes, that'll be the third, and then there'll be F2, which will be the fourth scenario that you get.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's just so we can compare the numbers, and that'll help us either eliminate F1 or not.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, but the thing to be aware of with G is that it's at 99% in 2026.
Right, so with G, let's see here, so I'm guessing we're speaking of Colonial Forge. Yes. Colonial Forge would be at 99% in this scenario.
Are we asking for that same change of the stay at North, or?
I would prefer that for just consistency's sake.
I would want to see how, if that goes up 3%, I wouldn't agree.
Well, I just mean to look at the
Is-
numbers.
yeah. Or if
I'm
there's
not-
something we can draw out.
But we kind of have the numbers if we look at G1, because G1 puts that community back.
Well, I have a problem with G also leaving Mountain View at 87.
Yes, that is what I said
That's
before.
not, yeah.
It puts Colonial Forge at 100% in 2026.
And Mountain View never gets bigger than 87%,
That's not great.
which is a
It's
complete
way underutilizing
underutilization
that
of the
school.
school. So that's why I said from earlier, I can't get behind G
No,
because of
me
that,
either.
because I can, I'm looking at schools that are 102 and Colonial Forge at 106%, when Mountain View's at 87.
No,
I can't get behind that, so.
same.
So can we just eliminate it?
But then we're down to only a couple.
Which is the point.
We wanted to go to 3, but is there, okay, I'm not going to suggest.
Can I ask
Mhm.
and I don't, I'm just, one of the things that I'm hearing is concern about taking all these kids
It's not, because it splits Park Ridge.
west to Colonial Forge. Would it make any sense, I don't know what the numbers would look like, but I'm looking at scenario G,
Uh-huh.
right? And you see the yellow APU that's in between Brook Point and Route 1, I guess? Or is that,
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what that red boundary is. But would it make sense for any of
Excuse
those
me, Madam
APUs
Chair,
to
we
come
have
down to
other
Stafford?
conversations going on here, and I can't hear Dr. Chase. So
Right.
if we could, you could ask the board to have
You say
one
that
speaker at
last
a time.
sentence.
Yes, so what I was saying is, would it make sense to
Mhm.
take any of these kids that Mr. Fulmer says having them go across to Forge would be a problem? Would it make sense to take any of them south to Stafford?
I see.
I just have no idea, but just in terms of the numbers there, I
That's a
just,
different, that's very different. Haven't heard that yet. We can develop a scenario where we would take planning units. So if I'm hearing you correctly, grab planning units that are currently zoned in scenario G for Colonial Forge that are on Route 1, but the ones that are east of Route 1, reassign them south to Stafford.
right. I mean, I just don't know what that would, I have no idea transportation-wise, I have no idea, but it's like, all these plans look really similar,
Uh-huh.
and so it was just a thought.
One thing I would like to point out,
Yeah.
we look at Stafford, let's look at the capacity, so it's 94%. Let's look at Colonial Forge.
Would you then
106.
have to take the I don't know how many students that is.
Mhm.
Are we then saying, I don't know how we can,
I can pick that.
I feel like we looked at the bottom half of the Colonial Forge piece there, and what that actually covers is not, it's not as many students as you think to be impactful for any,
No,
for any
it's not
reason.
very many at the bottom, but as you
Yes.
go up
Right, but I'm
north,
not
it
looking
gets-
I'm not looking to have those kids, to avoid crossing Route 1, I'm not looking to bring them down it any further either. And that's a big distance from where that piece of the Colonial Forge pie ends and Stafford High School is, considering they'll be on Route 1 that whole time. So in one scenario, you're crossing over it, which may seem whatever, but to come down it, that's a different story. I think, in my head, because, I mean,
We have a lot of kids who are going to be doing that. All that pink area that currently goes to Brook Point, they will all be coming down Route 1.
yeah,
So,
but that geography mass over there isn't filled with a ton of, I mean, you have to look at what the geography is made of as well, too, and there's not a lot of houses or things in there anyway. That's a lot of land mass without homes and whatever. The other piece of that isn't. That's all populous there.
it doesn't make any difference to me. I was just saying that it might make sense to have a plan that has fewer kids crossing to go to Colonial Forge. But,
We'll take a look at it. My first glance is those aren't the ones that transportation was as concerned about because they're right at that Courthouse Road Diamond. So you're not having to deal with Route 1, you're just crossing Route 1. It's the ones north that are having to travel cross Route 1 and go down Route 1.
okay, well, we don't need to, I mean, I just was like, would
No,
that make any sense? But no, I don't have any investment in it at all.
Okay, so then we had option G.
And so, so we've gone through E, F1, and G1.
It should
Was
be
there-
G, but G is what
G,
is
I'm sorry.
kept.
Just regular G.
I would have loved to see a blend of the two, but. Because neither. Yeah, basically.
So G is what, Pullingham, I don't know what neighborhood that is, out of North Park Ridge into Forge? Is that what's happening?
G is, again, it's the same 3 planning units that were in B, C. It's Autumn Ridge and Winding Creek. It does keep the western boundary the same as it is now, I think.
And then there's like a little tiny unit there that now goes to Mountain View, is that right?
Yes,
Like a tiny, yeah.
yes, in this scenario, yes.
Is that Oak Crest?
I believe so.
So that was selected because the students there are already zoned to AG Wright. But it would keep the rest of that area. Or does that include Arbor Glen as well? Because I see that little triangle for Marshall Estates, but I can't zoom on paper.
Oh, I'm gonna let you know right now, I'm just pulling up a map.
So for me,
Listen, I get it. I get it, we get it. come up with something that puts some students inside Mountain
No,
View, or we can't?
I'm
like,
going to
this
do
is-
that.
Okay,
just
'cause
hold
this is
on.
way before.
So
That's Marshall Estates.
it is, so it's Arbor Glen and Marshall Estates is that tiny green piece.
Which is about 30 students, is it?
So my
Lionel?
issue with G1 is that, one, it has north at 102%. And she said, why she doesn't like G. So to come up with an option, and we kind of playfully suggested a G2, which would basically be, I'm gonna do this right. The Mountain View Forge boundary of G1, but the north boundary, the north Forge line of G. So in G, where the way north, the boundary line between north and Forge would stay the same, but blend with the
Oh, I see.
east-west boundary on G1.
Okay.
Because we can't add, like, for me, I'm like, oh, I would like G1 if we didn't split Park Ridge, because
Right.
that's those vertical neighborhoods, the vertical planning units above,
I see it.
that's part of Park Ridge, and I don't want to split Park Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't keep them at north when north's already at 102%.
And so essentially, if you look at scenario H, just the planning units that you were talking about, I think a lot of that is in scenario H.
No, well,
No.
yes, except for scenario H, we don't want to move Hampton Oaks.
Right.
But like, if we're talking about what that
I understand.
three-district
Mhm.
blend looks like,
Uh-huh.
that would be my preference of what that particular nexus looks like.
Got it. And with that nexus, what do we want to call that?
G2, obviously, but I
Just want to
just,
make sure we're
A
all on the
migraine?
same page. Yeah. So G2,
Yeah.
Okay, so
And also
Are
G1
you adding
keeps
and
that green
subtracting?
section at north.
I'm just trying to understand, but no, I'm talking about this, you're moving people, if you're moving people out, we almost have to move people in to keep these numbers balanced.
Well, that's why we're asking to see what those look like, but, yeah.
no, why are we keeping, let me just understand real quick here. At G, the southern part of North Stafford in G, they stay at north or they move to Forge? Because honestly, Park Ridge hears the band at north, so.
That's my point. In G1, let me come over and draw it.
Could you? Thank you. Like that?
Yes.
We have to remember what Mr. White said about these projections for 2032. That is, if every single approved development were actually developed and had families living in there with children.
Say that again?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I would be absolutely astounded if that were the case. Every single approved development has to get to these numbers.
We don't
I
have a choice,
am
but to not
not,
plan for that. Like,
I-
we don't have a choice.
well, I don't know. I mean, I personally, and I had this discussion today with Mr. White, I'm not sure that I would be looking 8 years out, or 10 years out.
But
I
that's the
just-
problem with this
We're not
county,
even
is
at
that
10
we
years.
don't. We don't plan ahead, and then we're constantly reacting to the issues. Right now, we know what's coming. There's nothing stopping Westlake. Centerport Parkway is blowing up. There are 3,300 new homes coming to this county, whether it's in 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years. But this is the moment that we're in now, and we have the opportunity to plan ahead. And to miss the opportunity, shame on us,
Well,
because we've been told.
And I agree, but 100 to 102, to me, is not going to make that much of a difference. In fact, didn't you tell us before when we were doing this that we could go up to 105? When we were, the last redistricting we did, 105 would be, not ideal, but it would be in an acceptable range. So I don't think any of these numbers are, unacceptable if in fact even everything got developed.
right.
Yeah, but if we're
Yeah.
okay with North or Brook Point being at 105, I understand it's, have a bigger footprint than North, but 105 at Brook Point could be 102 at North. Y'all don't
I
have
would
a
also like
problem
to
with
point
that.
out, it's also good to say,
I don't
we don't
get
care
it.
if it's 105 when we're not the kids in those schools. And we're not the ones that are in the hallways of the crowded schools. And we're not the ones that have to suffer the actual implication of an overcrowded school at 105%. So I don't think it's fair to say that 105% isn't that big of a deal when we're not the ones in that school.
Ms. Halsted, you didn't hear me. What I said was Mr. White told us in a prior redistricting, it was very early on when you came on the board. Am I incorrect, Mr. White? Did you not say that we could be at 105, not great, but it was doable? I'm not suggesting it is ideal. I'm not saying I don't care. So, I know things are getting emotional here. I'm trying to keep my emotions out, and I would appreciate, all of us listening to what we're saying. And I think Ms. Guy just made an excellent point that 102 at North is going to be different from 102 somewhere else because of the size of the hallways. It's an older school. And we know that from when Stafford was rebuilt. It was horrible down at Stafford. They didn't have windows, they had narrow hallways. So that's also a consideration, which I don't know that Mr. White has taken that into effect in his percentage. I'm not suggesting that you did, but we're just looking at this in the broad picture.
Right.
But
I'd
what
like
else
to
does?
add to what you
Okay.
just said, that as we get closer to that 10-year window, we're going to do an administrative boundary change more than likely if we see imbalanced enrollment. So this is what it looks like with the current boundaries 10 years out. But if we're 2 years before 2032 and we see there's imbalanced enrollment, every year we look at, can we improve our boundaries? That happens every year.
Right, but in the past, when we've had to move people for space, we look at the most efficient move. And the most efficient move means sending buses into high-density neighborhoods and picking up as many children as we can. And we have found that the neighborhoods that have the higher density also have the lower income. And that's not fair either. I don't want to move kids because they're convenient, and I don't want to move kids because we're not making decisions now. I want to plan the best we can to have, even if it means moving more kids than we want to, or not, we're dumping every crayon out of the box. And we'll put them back in a way that makes sense. But I don't want to plan for, I don't want to go into this planning for future boundary changes. We all know that if we don't get schools on time, they are inevitable. But I don't want to go in and say, we'll just move them later. Let's just.
But we're okay with, when what I was saying with Ms. Healy got half of what I said is, you've got 102 at North, and you're not happy with that because you're Garrisonville, but Brook Point is at 105, and that's just one of the ones that we put through. I want the camera to see this graph that hasn't been on the TV. That red, that's all Brook Point. And my board members, we're okay with this. But 102, we're going to argue over at North. What I'm saying is argue at 105 as well, like I advocated for North when I was in his office. That's what I'm saying. It's okay for Brook Point. I mean, we're making a new plan because you don't want it at 102. Well, then
Right.
make a new plan for Brook Point.
Well, we have to
I'm
pick
making
two
a plan
schools.
because I don't want to see Mountain View in the 80s. I want to see Mountain View in the 90s.
I agree with that 100%
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
But I'm just saying.
Right.
Mr. White told us that 2 of our schools will be over 100%, and that we need to plan for that, and try to plan that so that a future redistricting for high school 7 is simpler. I prefer, because of the age of the infrastructure and watching what has happened with Hartwood and watching what has happened with Drew, that it is not our oldest high school at 100 and something. And if that means that the Garrisonville constituents that are at Colonial Forge are sitting at 106%, then that's better than the Garrisonville constituents that are at North sitting at 102.
And as we said, and I think it was before you got here, Ms. Sigmund,
I would prefer to shift the burden from North to Forge, and if I have to pick a second one, Brook Point, because of the anticipation of where High School 7 is going to be. But because Forge is a newer build, and therefore the infrastructure could take the increased capacity. For the brief time we anticipate, it will be between being at 100% and over and the opening of a high school 7. I don't have a lot of confidence in what I've seen in the older buildings handling the increased capacity, and I, again, would prefer not to have to decompress north later because the building is failing because it's at 105. So if I have to plan for overages in someplace, it's gonna be 1, geography-based, and 2, infrastructure-based.
Most of these have Forge as the one that's mostly over, which puts it at the center of Stafford. It gives us opportunities to move east, west, north, or south. And I think that makes the most sense.
Anyone else want to add anything else?
I'd just like to say, I don't think we're going to be ready to really make any decision on what we're going to be considering until we see these rewrites.
Yes.
Um,
And that will be Tuesday at our work
Well,
session?
we're having a
Is that what we
public
just said?
hearing, but the public needs to know that we are re-looking at these scenarios. We've narrowed it down to some framework, but we're looking at, I'll call it tweaks for being an optimistic view, to those. But I don't feel that we're going to be in a position to present these to the public because we're asking the questions. Poor Mr. White, he's been up for the past week working to get us all these things, but we're asking him to come up with something else for us to look at.
So, Ms. Healy, would you suggest that like, could I make a motion that we remove plans A, B, C, D, F, G1, H, and H1?
Well, I thought somebody was talking about G1. It wasn't one of my favorites,
Those,
but.
based on, Ms. Randall,
No,
are
it was
those the ones that you wrote down?
It was E, F1, and G, and we have gone back over E. We have gone over F1 and said we would like an F2. We went over G and said we would like a G2.
But, so
So-
from what we have, were the ones that we are going to, the antithesis of that, the elimination list is.
Exactly what Dr. Chase said.
Okay, so is there a second to Dr. Chase?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Are the voting buttons working?
We
I
didn't
don't know.
have a chance to have discussion?
Sorry, you're
Okay,
right.
Go ahead,
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna vote without a discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay, then you started.
I think it's fine to eliminate today, but what we're talking about is making either adjustments to the ones that are remaining or potentially new scenarios. I don't feel that we're going to be in a position to get public comment on scenarios that we have been discussing, but we haven't even seen.
That was going to be my second motion. My first motion was just to eliminate the ones that we've said we can eliminate, and then my second motion was going to be that we get these back on Tuesday and that we postpone the public hearing, but. And therefore the vote. And therefore the vote.
We don't, so postpone to when?
December.
So I did check with Lisa on the requirement of public hearing. We can postpone the public hearing. The public hearing only needs to be within 7 days of our vote. So even if we had it Tuesday and still deferred the vote portion, we would be in compliance, which of course, we want to stay out of orange, so that's always my question. I have real concerns not having a decision made before Christmas break for our families. I do not think that we should have redistricting hanging over families when they're on holiday, or us, or staff, or any of that.
Right,
I
but the
would.
school doesn't open till 2026. I mean, I don't.
This is
see-
already a long process, and it's a stressful process.
Then we should have made these new plans before tonight.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, or stop making plans. Stop making tweaks and vote on what's here, or make your little plans and your little tweaks and delay. I don't have a problem with it. If you wanted us to have the vote, then you shouldn't be tweaking stuff. We should be voting on what's here. So you got to pick. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
We can. I mean, we absolutely can.
Well, why don't we go
So
back
we have a
and look at
motion
the
on the
three?
floor right now.
We're having a discussion.
Right,
We're
but
having a
I'm saying,
discussion.
we don't need to talk about postponing, she's mentioning it's a second one, but we can talk about that in the second motion, but for this motion, we're discussing bringing us, of eliminating, that's all we're discussing.
But I think in the discussion of eliminating, we have to also talk about what we're going to consider. If we're just going to consider these that have not been eliminated, that's one thing. But if we're going to ask for more plans, either new plans or changes to these plans, then I think we need to have that discussion now. And what I would suggest is that we go back and look, we've got 3 plans, we look at these plans and see what we want to see changed in 1 or 2 or 3 of these plans. Because that's
we
what
just
we're
did that.
discussing.
So I think the conversation, and I forget
Hold
who
on.
I've had. hold
We're
on.
asking only right now to go back to the focal point, to get these other ones off the table so that we can go back over the ones that are remaining and then discuss if there's any changes or postponing those. Because without that, then we have 97 scenarios still in front of us. So if we can just vote on the motion, it's not that we're getting up and walking out of here, then the next step is, with what's left, are there changes to be made? And what's more important, changes to the maps or voting before the holidays? That's the next discussion. But that should only happen once the rest of these things are off the table for discussion, if we're not open to discussing them any further. Otherwise, we're just making this way more complicated in my mind than it needs to be, because one of the primary components of coming here today was to eliminate some of the scenarios to reduce the confusion of the public, which we both did, and then we increased it in the very second breath that we took. So I'm not, the only thing I'm for right now is there was a motion on the table to eliminate the ones that we've already agreed that for one reason or another aren't gonna work out. So if we eliminate those, we're still left with the ones that we said we wanted to discuss. Then the motion, I won't make it because I won't know how in the world to say it. Then there is still another motion and discussion on the table because we're not done yet.
But Madam Chair, could you call the question?
Could you repeat the motion so we know?
Yes, my motion was that we instruct staff to eliminate plans A, B, C, D, F, G1, H, and H1.
And again, and we have a second?
Yeah.
And you've confirmed that the list matches what we've talked about
Yeah.
before? Okay.
But yeah.
Cast your votes. I don't know if that's working. Yes, there it is.
Not coming up.
Tally the vote, are those votes?
Pressing it.
They're not,
Oh, there we go.
okay. That motion passes 6-1 with Ms. Healy dissenting.
Okay.
Okay, so the second.
The second motion is that we are going to discuss plans E, F1, and G, and make any adjustments individually.
When is that happening?
And we will do that Tuesday. Tuesday?
Tuesday.
At the board meeting?
At the work
And
session.
that means then
Work session.
delaying the public.
The
I don't know what,
Delaying the public vote. So we could have we can have the public discussion.
The hearing,
The hearing, the public hearing, and then delay the vote till December.
The vote is already in December.
Is that?
The problem is if these plans have not been out there long enough for people to make public comment. So Mr. White has been working very hard to get all this together. For him to have to come up with additional plans and additional charts by Tuesday, but before Tuesday, so that the public can look at it, that's a tough call. So I would say, I'd love to see them Tuesday, but the public comment or public hearing wouldn't happen until our next meeting, or if we called a special meeting, but it wouldn't be until December, and then the vote would not be until January, potentially.
I would not be in favor of that. I think that we are not discussing moving any neighborhoods to someplace they're not anywhere else. I thought the motion and the
There
second
hasn't
were
been a
here.
clear motion yet, it was just,
Oh.
so, shall I make a motion?
Well, we shouldn't have a discussion without a motion.
Yeah, all right. So, motion is that staff will bring us plans E, F1, and G, along with a modification that would be F2 and a modification that would be G2 to the meeting on Tuesday. And then we would push the public comment back to our next meeting in December, and then we would push the actual vote on the redistricting to January. That's my motion.
Just to get it right. Got it. Second.
Second.
Discussion? just me. I would be opposed to that because we are not talking about moving people anywhere we haven't already talked about moving them. At this point, we're thinking about blending scenarios. If we were talking about moving like Hampton Oaks to Mountain View, that would be something that we have not discussed at all. But if we're talking about moving Hampton Oaks to North or to Forge in a scenario J, which we aren't up to, those are scenarios that were already on the table and we've already been able to weigh in on that move. So I think blending the scenarios isn't actually a new scenario for the neighbors that would be impacted, though it would be a new scenario for our consideration. And I've weighed in on why I don't think we should delay. I also would love the public comment or the public hearing to stay on Tuesday, so that citizens could tell us whether they prefer that we decide before or after the holidays if they have an opinion. But I'm not interested in deciding now that we're going to extend this process.
My concern is for them to comment on new plans that don't appear until Tuesday morning. They won't have had time to review them. So that's my concern. But I do want to make an amendment to my motion, which is that in all the plans, Crow's Nest is moved back to Brook Point. Is my second amenable to that?
Yes, second, as amenable to that.
Okay, so I feel, not great if someone is like very excited to come to the public hearing and speak on Tuesday, but I'm fine with pushing it back because I just don't think it's right to change something and not let the public see it. It doesn't matter if they're already gonna be moved, and I don't think that's right. I think it's disingenuous for us to sit here and talk about we're gonna have this meeting and we're gonna get down to 3 and now we're going back up to 5, but no, we're not gonna pause. And, it's Stafford County Public Schools. What happens to building a consensus? It's not Sigmund County Public Schools or Guy County Public Schools. And if you want to sit here at the day that we're supposed to be taking things away and then adding scenarios because you don't want to split something in your district, then you need to be a little bit more agreeable to changing the schedule. It's not like we're opening up the high school in 6 months. They still have over a year to digest this information. This is one of the things that staff isn't like, you got to make this decision. We always talk about, we always feel rushed. Well, stop rushing us. In that case, it's us rushing us and not staff.
So in that case, Lionel, how do you feel about that? Like, what kind of
No.
lead time do you
Don't
need?
put-
What makes
Don't
your
Lionel
put
just
life,
Lionel
said
on the
no
spot.
thank
I'm just
you.
gonna-
like, what
Madam-
makes your
Madam
life
Chair,
a
I'd like
little
to-
bit
to weigh
easier?
So I think that we have to do this right. And this is complicated because we're moving students in we've got 6 schools that we're trying to shuffle. The school doesn't open until 2026. I think families would be more interested in us in getting this right than getting this done quickly. And I don't, as a parent, I don't know that I would have cared if redistricting was hanging over my head over the Christmas holidays, because I wouldn't be thinking about it. So I'm comfortable with delaying it so that we can actually look at these scenarios, give the public hearing and the people time to discuss it, and we can make those decisions at a comfortable pace.
Ms. Halsted?
So I just, in terms of count, not that I want an extra meeting after all the extra meetings that we've had in the extra month, last month. However, to Dr. Chase's point, if we were to consider keeping it in December, and I'm wavering on it. Like, I don't really know how I feel about it right now, one way or the other. I'm not emotionally passionate about delaying or not delaying, but if we could get it and then delay the public hearing until like the 19th of November, is that too short a time to let the public know that there's a hearing?
Yeah, we're not in town.
On the 19th of November? Oh, that's that week, or, geez, where's my calendar?
Mr. Fulmer?
Is there
I have a headache.
any objection or reason behind not having the community or the public hearing in December and the vote in December? Do you need meetings in between?
We have to have 7 days between the public hearing and the vote.
Are you I thought Ms. Bower was saying we have to advertise 7 days before the public hearing, but you can have the vote.
So, Mr. Fulmer, if I'm a parent, I'm not on this board, and I come to a public hearing, and then you vote, you already made up your mind, so why waste my time with a public hearing?
Well, I think the discussion, all the options will still be on the table because we're
I'm
not
telling
adding
you,
options.
I am telling you, when I get those calls and emails, I'll give them your number, because that's what's gonna happen.
I was
'cause
just
I would-
throwing it out
and
there.
I'm telling you, I'm
I know,
telling you,
just throwing it out there.
with the
I think
people
that
we're
was-
gonna
That was a
think.
fair statement.
So-
Mr.
He
Palmer,
said
that-
delete.
If I could read what Ms. Boatright sent me earlier this afternoon. The Virginia Code requires a public hearing to take place with notice given to the public at least 7 days in advance for redistricting. The notice has to be in a local newspaper. The public hearing can take place at the same meeting in which the board votes to make a decision, as long as the public hearing takes place before the vote. So, yes, but I tend to agree with you.
I will
So-
have
so
my,
there's
mo-
a- So there's a motion on the table?
I have not had a chance to talk, if you don't mind not calling for the question until I finish. I don't see why we could not have a public hearing in November and December, because we know we have 3 that are under consideration. The other ones may not be available. I do not want to vote the night of a public hearing. I agree with Ms. Guy. You know, there's certainly an appearance that, you know, we're just doing it because we have to have a public hearing. I don't see that the public is going to be in a position to comment on things that are just coming out, even in a good case, coming out on Monday. And I wouldn't expect them to come out on Monday, but, you know, it's unreasonable. And I think that it will give some time for Mr. White to be able to look at these all. It's not like he can just go push all the buttons and have these new, you know, plans come out. I'm just very, I'm concerned because it feels like we're trying to rush through this. We're rushing something when we have, you know, over a year and a half before the school opens. And if we need to do it right, so that we're not looking back and say, gee, if we had really, you know, thought about that or looked at it. And I think there's some good points that have been raised tonight. And I think we need to look at this red for Brook Point, because Brook Point is now one of the older schools. They just, you know, it's Forge, you know, you're saying Forge is newer, and Forge opened 24 years ago. 25 years ago, Forge opened, so.
Can I just ask you to clarify
one of
the
our new
point of
ones.
the 2 public hearings? Why would you say 2?
Well, the reason I said I would not be opposed to that is because the public knows that we've narrowed it down to 3. So if they have any comments on that 3, they could come and give them. But they also will know that there will be other options under consideration, so they could not only comment on the 3, they could comment on anything else. But when we have the second public hearing, then we would have exactly the scenarios that we're looking at, because once we get these new scenarios, we may change the 3 that we've narrowed it down to now. But if they're planning on a public hearing and they want to speak to us, I'm more than willing to listen.
So
But
are you
recognizing that we're going to be, you know, having more scenarios, or they might just say, you know, I don't think I'm going to go now because it's too early, I want to look at the whole thing. But it could go either way. But since we've advertised, have we advertised it, Ms. Sigmund?
Yes.
We've advertised the public hearing. We also advertised this meeting where we say we were going to narrow, and we are eliminating, but we're also potentially adding. Mr. White might come back and give us something and go, ugh, you know, let's just go with the 3 we have. We don't know. But I'd rather keep the public hearing that's scheduled for November and say we're going to schedule another public hearing, whether it's at our December meeting or sometime before it. I wouldn't do it after.
So that
because of the
amendment to my
holidays.
motion is acceptable to me, that we would have the vote in January, but we will still have the public hearing in November. Next week is planned, and then we will have another one in December.
In December, and we can say the vote for the date for December is to be determined, because we'll have to look at our agenda and see if it makes sense to have it as part of our meeting, or if we want to have it on a separate night. But we need to be clear to the public that this is a preliminary, you know, plan. Yes, yes, this is his first of 2 public hearings, and that we're having this because it's already scheduled, and we do have some plans that they can comment on. But they have to be aware that there could be other changes. Because I don't think we can put a plan into consideration that has not been published, for people to look at. And I really don't want to put any more pressure on you, Mr. White, because I truly appreciate everything you've done to this point. And if in fact you don't have these by Tuesday, I'm not going to be complaining, because I'd rather give you the time that you need to make these adjustments, so when they come back, we're not coming back and say, ooh, can you change something else? So, that's what I would say, since we're gonna have another public hearing anyway, but at least we can get feedback on these three.
Also, Mr. White, this would be a good time for you to email your Christmas wish list. Can you?
All right, so we can call the question?
Before we do that, I think it's helpful, because we're having all this discussion, if we could repeat the motion so that we know exactly what we're voting on.
Okay, so first, we are going to remove Crow's Nest from, or return Crow's Nest to Brook Point. And then we will be considering options, plans E, F1, and G, and we will see an F2 and a G2. Hopefully Tuesday, but if it takes a little
It'll be
longer.
Tuesday.
It'll be Tuesday. And we will have a preliminary public hearing on Tuesday, and then we will have another public hearing scheduled in December, and our vote will be in January.
Agreed.
Thank you.
You can cast your votes. The motion passes 6-1 with Sigmund as the dissenting vote. For the record, Ms.
Closed meeting?
Ms. Yes.
Okay, Lionel,
Closed meeting?
Can you read us?
ready to get started?
Okay.
I only got one.
I came in
and
one.
it's gone.
And all I cared about was bus
I
rides for
move that the
Stafford
school
kids.
board of Stafford County approve and accept the candidate discuss, nope. I'm so sorry, I don't have it. Wait.
Moving right along.
I don't have it. Missy's not here, that's why. Well, it's not, this is what Angie, oh, wait, is it this one? Oh, she did give it to me, I'm sorry. The font is so small, I'm sorry, I did not see it. The school board will convene a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia to discuss candidates for employment as division superintendent. Yeah, that's-
Second.
Please cast, do we have to vote? So please don't leave.
We have to vote. Didn't mean to, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're going to leave it?
No, it's a,
Is it a yes? Is it a no?
it was a yes, I put the yes
Okay.
after the no.
So 7-0, we are enclosed.
Managing her face, like you do.
Five. Angie, can you, there's no motion coming out of the closed session.
She's still got to read it.
Oh,
Thing here. The board will vote on the follow, okay, just read her, okay. That pursuant to section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia, the closed meeting of the School Board of Stafford County on November 7, 2024 be certified by adopting the following resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that the School Board of Stafford County hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. And two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board.
Second.
Thank you, Jesus.
Angie, you have to pull the board.
Dr. Chase?
Agree.
Ms. Guy?
Yes.
Ms. Halsted?
Yes.
Ms. Healy?
Yes.
Ms. Randall?
Agree.
Ms. Sigmund?
Agree.
Dr. Warner?
Agree.
Madam Chair, the vote is unanimous.